It's hard enough building out a good web application, but making it a performant, SEO-friendly, accessible web application is even harder, which is where the tool Lighthouse comes in because it lets you know anywhere that you make a mistake in performance, SEO, accessibility, and so much more. Let me show you. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Now to get started, I just have my JavaScript simplified website open up on the left side here, and on the right side, I have the dev tools open. So as you can see, I have the console, I have sources, I have elements, and I've gone over to this tab called Lighthouse. And the whole purpose of Lighthouse is to just run a bunch of different checks throughout all these different categories to determine if your site is performant, if it has accessibility issues, if you have some SEO things that you can improve. So this is a super great tool. One important thing to note though when you run Lighthouse is make sure you do it in an incognito window. This just makes sure that there's no saved session or cookie information, and it also makes sure none of the extensions you have downloaded for Chrome are going to interfere with the process. So once you have that done, just click Generate Report. And as you can see, it's going through and we're doing a mobile report. So as you can see, our application's in mobile and it's running a bunch of different tests on your site to make sure everything's working as expected. And then once it finishes up, you're going to get popped up a report that tells you how performant your site is and so on. So as you can see, we scored pretty well here. We have 99 in performance, 92 in accessibility, 93 in best practices, and 100 in SEO. And even if you score all 100s on Lighthouse, it doesn't mean your site is 100% perfect. But if you do have good scores on Lighthouse, it at least means you've taken care of a lot of the basics and important things to understand when it comes to these different categories. And if you scroll down, you can see more detailed information about everything. So you can see here information about the speed of how quickly your page loads and how quickly people can interact with it. For example, time to interactive is 2.2 seconds here. Our total blocking time is only 110 milliseconds. So all these things are really good. They're listed in green. And as you can see, we kind of have some screenshots of what the first part of the page looks like. This is really useful for if your page loads in and then a bunch of other things load in and things start jumping around. These screenshots are going to show that to you right away. Then down here is where we have a list of different things that we can improve upon. So this yellowy color here essentially means it's like a minor problem. It's something that's not super bad, but it could be a problem. And this just says eliminate render blocking resources. We can click on it and it gives us even more information. Essentially it's saying, hey, you know what? If I got rid of the custom font on this page, we could save almost a second of loading time because of that. And also down here, we have some main thread work that's going on. It's saying, hey, there's a little bit too much going on in this main thread. So see if you can actually fix that issue. And then it has some grayed out stuff, which is just stuff that's not as important, not as big of a deal. And then down here, if we clicked past audits, you can see all the things that we've successfully done, such as minifying our JavaScript, minifying our CSS, and so on. Now, if we continue downward, we get into accessibility, and here you can see we have some red triangles. These red triangles are essentially similar to the orange, but it just means that this is a more severe issue. And I love this because it says, background and foreground colors do not have sufficient contrast ratio. And if you click on it, it gives you an actual screenshot of where these problems are. Now, for some reason, my screenshots weren't quite lining up correctly, so I just reran the report, and as you can see now, the screenshots are lining up correctly. But you can also see something important is that the numbers at the top here for my different categories have changed. I had 99 in performance earlier, and this time it shows a 93. So it's important to make sure you run the test a couple different times just to make sure that there's no issues with cache or anything going on. And if we go up, you can see that certain categories where I had a green check, you can see are now yellow, where it's saying, hey, it's a little bit borderline now compared to where it was before. So run these a few times just to make sure you don't have any outliers in your results. But if we scroll down here, you can see, it's saying, hey, you know what, this element that we have right here, and if I click on it, it'll bring me to that inside of the elements tab. It's just saying, hey, the element doesn't quite have the correct contrast. We can click on the picture to zoom in and really see where this is. So it gives me all the elements where, hey, the contrast between the background and the foreground is not quite there. So I really like having that. Also, you can see here that I don't have a lang attribute on my HTML, and it's saying, hey, just make sure you add that lang attribute onto your HTML. Super straightforward. And then we have some past audits right here, as well as some things that just aren't applicable to this actual site. So now going down here, we have best practices. This is really nice because these are things you don't really think about when you're programming, but it's good to make sure you check them off a list because a lot of them are really important. So you can see it here, it says links to cross-origin destinations are unsafe. And this is something I always forget to do. When you have an anchor tag that has the target to open up in another location, so the target is blank, for example, you want to make sure that you add these different attributes of rel no opener or rel no refer just to make sure you don't have any security vulnerabilities. It's something that I always forget to do. So having this being like, hey, you forgot to do it on these buttons is a super important thing that I should do. And then if we scroll down a little further, you can see we have SEO. And for us, we passed all of the tests. So there's nothing actually showing up. And as you can see, we even have manual tests that are saying, hey, make sure you manually test these things as well because the tool can't do that. And finally, if I had a progressive web app, this would show up down here. This is not a progressive web app, so it's not showing up at all. But in the next example, I'm going to show you my blog, which is a progressive web app, so we can take a look at what this section is going to look like. Now, I just pulled up my blog website, which is a progressive web app, and you'll notice we get this error down here that's saying, hey, there's information stored in IndexedDB. Make sure you audit in an incognito window to prevent this. And one other thing we can do is go over to the application tab. We can go to this IndexedDB, and we can just make sure that we delete this completely, get rid of it. That way we don't have to worry about this slowing down or speeding up our application. And now if we go back to Lighthouse, we can just generate that report, and it's going to go through and run the entire report. And again, we're doing a mobile report. Now, I'd make sure that you both run a mobile and a desktop report because you're going to get different results since things will load quicker in a desktop and slower in mobile and so on. Also, it's important you make sure that you have the actual window that you're going to be doing the test on open somewhere on your screen. Otherwise, Lighthouse won't be able to work. So now, as you can see, we have performance, accessibility, best practices, SEO, and we also have this progressive web app section, which looks a little different. You'll also notice we got this warning here again about that IndexedDB. It's not really something we have to worry about in this instance. But if we scroll down, you can see, we have certain things like cumulative layout shift. And if we scroll down, it's saying remove some unused JavaScript and so on. And if we just keep scrolling all the way down to the bottom, we're going to get the progressive web app section. And this is really great just to make sure your PWA is actually working as you expect. You can see that ours is installable. It has all of these different things checked for it being optimized. The only thing we don't have is a maskable icon inside of our manifest, which isn't a big deal to me because I don't really care too much about this blog being a PWA, but since I built it on top of Gatsby, it just automatically is a PWA. Now, finally, I want to show you what a report is going to look like on a slightly less optimized site, and we're just going to do a desktop this time just to see the differences. Let's click Generate Report. This is on my courses website, so if you just go courses.webdevsimplified.com, this is a much bulkier site. It's something that I don't actually control myself since I use a third-party service for it, so I'm guessing it's going to be much less performant and much worse in all of these different regards when it comes to this course. And as you can see, already we're in the orange or the yellow for pretty much every single category, and that's to be expected on this site. And if we scroll down, we get a bunch of information saying, like the largest contentful paint is taking 3.3 seconds. That's definitely not good, especially because that's the desktop speed. Mobile would be even slower than this. If we scroll down, you can see that we have information. We got some blocking resources, unused JavaScript. Our images are maybe too large. As you can see, this image is much larger than it needs to be. Different things that we can improve upon. And these are things that when you're developing the site, you don't really think about, hey, I used too large of an image, because for you, it's loading quickly because it's local on your disk. You don't have to transfer it over the internet. But when you upload this onto an actual site and people have to download it, these large images are going to make a huge difference. Now, if we keep going down a little ways, you can see we have a bunch of other information. Something about the web fonts aren't actually showing up. They're not being visible, which is not a good thing. Image elements don't have explicit width height. A bunch of information being like, hey, this is definitely not good. And as you can see, our total size was 3 megabytes essentially of download. That's definitely not what we want. That's way too much being sent over for just this, super basic page right here that has almost nothing on it. Same thing with accessibility. You can see our buttons don't have accessible names. This is not a good thing. And if you're confused by what this means, every single one of these has an explanation on what it is, as well as a learn more button where you can really dive deep into exactly what each one of these different categories do. And if we just keep scrolling, you can see there are tons of different red flags showing up on this website, which is to be expected on something that's much larger and something that I don't really have control over. And I would love to fix these things, but unfortunately on this site, I can't. So all this different information is something that you can look at and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to improve this. I don't have an alt tag on this image. I'm going to go through and I'm going to add an alt tag to all my images that are showing up in this category. And that's going to be something that drastically improves your site and is a super easy thing for you to fix. And that's honestly what I really love most about this tool. It's essentially a bunch of really small, easy to fix things that at once, if you do 1 or 2 of them at a time, isn't going to make a huge difference. But when you do 10, 20, 30 of these different changes, you're going to drastically improve your site, whether it's the speed, the accessibility, or the SEO performance are going to get drastically improved by taking these numbers from these lower numbers like 60, 70, 80, all the way up to higher numbers like 90 or 100. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out my other videos linked over here and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.